Let's talk about the framework trade deal that was reached between the U.S. and the EU yesterday. Emmanuel Macron has said that the deal is a dark day for Europe.
I don't know if the exact numbers will be the same that Canada will get, insofar as we are witnessing in Europe a deal that is not good for Europe.
Donald Trump just signed another trade deal, this time with the European Union. It wasn't subtle. A 15% tariff across most goods, hundreds of billions in energy purchases and investment into the U.S. economy, a flashy handshake in Scotland, and not a single mention of Canada. That silence speaks volumes. Canada is the United States' largest trading partner by many measures. But this time, it's not being prioritized. And that's not an accident. It's a strategy. For Trump, trade isn't just about economics, it's about optics and leverage. The EU gave him a global headline and billions in buying commitments. Canada doesn't offer that kind of short-term political payoff, so it's pushed aside. That doesn't mean Canada lacks leverage. It supplies 4 million barrels of oil per day to the US. It powers homes with cross-spur electricity. It provides critical inputs for American manufacturing from lumber to auto parts. But here's the problem. Those links are already in place. Canada can't promise more the way Japan or the EU can. It's already embedded in US supply chains. That makes it harder to turn existing value into a new deal that looks impressive on paper. Trump wants deals that are simple to sell. Buy American, pay tariffs, sign here. Canada's reality is more complex and less marketable. In this environment, complexity becomes a disadvantage.
Buy a bunch of stuff from America and tariffs across the board, 15, 20, 18%, 19% in one case. This is the challenge that partners are facing. This is the challenge that we are facing. I don't believe there is going to be a great deal to be had on the table.
Prime Minister Mark Carney knows this. That's why he's not rushing into anything. In his recent statements, Carney made it clear Canada will only accept a deal that works long-term, not just to avoid tariffs this week, but to protect its economic structure for the years ahead. Unlike the EU, Canada doesn't need to buy U.S. energy. In fact, it's the exporter. That makes its position fundamentally different. Carney understands that copying the EU framework would be a mismatch even if it buys short-term relief. Instead, his team is holding the line. They're managing public expectations, preparing for possible tariffs, and quietly aiming for a better opportunity, such as the scheduled USMCA review in 2026. It's a long game, and it's deliberate.
The assurance for Canadian business, for Canadians, is we will only sign a deal that's the right deal, that's a good deal for Canada. We're representing Canada.
Of course, there's pain in the short term. Canada's auto, steel, aluminum, and lumber sectors have taken hits, but the broader economy so far, it's proving resilient. According to CBC analysis, GDP only fell by 0.1% in April 2025 and may drop another 0.1% in May, far less than early projections. Many Canadian businesses imported goods ahead of tariff deadlines, blunting immediate shocks. And thanks to CUSMA, over 90% of cross-border trade still moves with minimal tariffs. The average effective rate remains around 2.3%. For now, that said, the situation is fragile. If the U.S. imposes a 35% blanket tariff on August 1st, as Trump has threatened, the real stress test will begin. But even so, this moment offers clarity. Canada is facing a structural challenge and responding not with panic, but with strategy. In Trump's world, countries line up, sign fast, and pay up. Canada isn't doing that, and it's not because it lacks options. It's because it's choosing not to play that game. Carney's refusal to rush is risky, but it's also calculated. He's betting that protecting national interest, even at the cost of short-term pain, will serve Canada better than folding under pressure. The U.S. may not see Canada as a priority, but that doesn't mean Canada is without power. It just means the path forward is longer and requires patience. Because in this trade war, waiting might be the boldest move of all.
We're working very diligently with Europe, the EU, which covers a lot of territory, a lot of countries. But we haven't really, we don't have a deal with Canada. We haven't been focused on it.
Just days before his self-imposed August 1st deadline, President Donald Trump said it out loud. The U.S. hasn't really been focused on Canada and might not even reach a trade deal. It wasn't just a shrug. It was a statement of disregard. In the middle of high-stakes negotiations, Trump dismissed America's largest trading partner as an afterthought. He hinted Canada could simply pay the tariffs with no real negotiation. To many in Ottawa, this wasn't a threat. It was a signal. Because unlike his approach with Japan or the UK, where pressure was carefully escalated, this moment revealed something else: impatience. And that impatience may have just handed Canada a strategic edge.
Yeah, and the first thing everyone needs to do is exhale, because what the president just said there actually lines up very consistently with what we heard from Canada's negotiators on this.
For weeks, the Canadian government has worked to manage public expectations. Prime Minister Mark Carney, Minister Dominic LeBlanc, and Ambassador Kirsten Hillman have all echoed one message: Canada won't rush into a bad deal. Trump's public remarks ended up confirming that very narrative. When the U.S. president openly admitted a deal may not happen, he gave Canada cover. Now, if talks break down, Ottawa won't take the blame because Washington walked away first. It's a rare case where silence from Canada was matched by a loud concession from the other side. For Ottawa, that's a communications victory, even without a signed agreement. Trump's comments also put his own trade team in a difficult position. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer have been actively engaging with Canada, describing talks as constructive and productive. LeBlanc has spent days in Washington meeting with senators and senior officials. Yet, as his own officials were making progress, Trump sent a different message to the world. Negotiations might not matter at all. This internal contradiction weakens the American position. It allows Canadian officials to question who holds the real authority and to slow-walk discussions until a coherent U.S. stance emerges. The more fractured the American message, the more leverage Canada gains. But perhaps the biggest consequence of Trump's remarks won't be felt this week. It'll come in 2026. Under the terms of the USMCA, the agreement must undergo a mandatory review that begins with a Free Trade Commission meeting expected by late 2025. Trump's team has already signaled plans to use that review to push for stricter origin rules, immigration clauses, and supply chain controls. However, if the U.S. imposes 35% tariffs on Canada now without achieving a negotiated outcome, that strategy may backfire. Canada and Mexico will be able to argue that tariffs have already failed as leverage. Worse, Trump may find himself entering the 2026 review with less credibility and fewer tools. Meanwhile, Canada is preparing its own parallel track, a proposed security and economic agreement to solidify its defense commitments and regional cooperation. That deal, still in early stages, could give Ottawa a new foundation for talks and weaken Trump's ability to dominate the agenda. What looked like a warning may actually be a leak. Trump likely believed he was turning up the pressure, but by speaking too soon and undercutting his own negotiators, he exposed the cracks in his trade strategy. He gave Canada a narrative it can control, a pace it can set, and a reason to delay until the balance shifts. There's still time for a deal, but if there isn't one, it won't just be Canada that pays the price. Trump's own credibility heading into 2026 may be what gets taxed next.
Scott Moe says that there needs to be increased cooperation with China. A news release that you guys had issued yesterday said that there needs to be a better working relationship on trade with China. That's specifically what the premiers were calling on the Prime Minister to do. So help me reconcile those two things. Is China the enemy, or do we work with China?
Premier Doug Ford didn't hold back. In the middle of one of the most uncertain trade climates in North American history, Ontario's premier stood before reporters and said the quiet part out loud. If Trump's tariffs continue, Canada may look east to China. This wasn't just a warning, it was a signal, a shift. One of Canada's most powerful provincial leaders openly floated the idea of deepening trade with Beijing, not Washington. And for the U.S., that could mean more than just a lost customer. It could mean a long-term strategic blow. So, what happens if Canada actually pivots to China? Let's break it down. Since returning to the White House, President Trump has made tariffs the centerpiece of his trade agenda. Once again, his administration argues this is about fairness, making sure America isn't taken advantage of. But for Canada, these policies haven't brought clarity. They've brought volatility. Steel, aluminum, autos, and even softwood lumber have been hit. And now a sweeping 35% tariff looms over all non-compliant Canadian goods, starting August 1st. For business leaders across North America, this isn't a negotiation tactic. It's a threat that keeps shifting, and it's reshaping the foundation of what used to be the world's most stable trade partnership.
You know what Churchill said, our enemy of our enemy is our friend, and as long as China plays fair and doesn't undercut our markets, be it the auto sector or any sector, I have no problem dealing with them.
In response, Canada hasn't shouted, it's acted. Ottawa has quietly escalated its own tariffs on American steel and aluminum, matching the U.S. increases. But more importantly, Canada is shifting focus. While there's still strong trade with the U.S., provincial leaders are building escape routes, pipelines, new export lanes, and diversified partnerships. That includes China. Ontario alone conducts over $43 billion in two-way trade with China. According to provincial figures, imports dominate that number, but Ford is clear. If the U.S. continues to act unpredictably, Canada will work with whoever plays fair, and that includes China. Even as Ford emphasizes protecting Canada's auto sector from Chinese EVs, his message is unmistakable. Canada is no longer beholden to the United States. We've already seen the signs. Canadian brewers are sourcing aluminum cans from China, not the U.S., due to skyrocketing prices from Trump's tariffs. RBC reports that as of June 2025, nearly 90% of Canadian exports entering the U.S. are now fully USMCA compliant. A defensive move proving Canadian businesses are adjusting supply chains to navigate around American uncertainty.
We buy about $349 billion of products. So Japan and the rest of the countries around the world have quite a bit to catch up to what we purchase off the U.S.
If Canada's pivot becomes permanent, the U.S. will feel it in ways that go far beyond headlines. In 2024, Canada purchased $349 billion worth of American goods, more than Japan, Germany, and the UK combined. Losing even a portion of that trade to China would hit U.S. manufacturers hard. Sectors like autos, machinery, agriculture, and energy rely on stable cross-border flows. If Canadian buyers shift orders to Chinese suppliers, the pain will be domestic, felt in states like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And it's not just about goods. Strategically, China has long sought to expand its influence in the Western Hemisphere. A deeper trade relationship with Canada would give Beijing more leverage in North America, something Washington has tried to avoid for decades. In trying to punish Canada, Trump may be pushing it into China's arms. Trump promised to win better trade deals, but tariffs have delivered something else: hesitation, retaliation, and uncertainty. Instead of pulling Canada closer, the White House is driving a wedge. A country that once stood as America's closest economic ally is now exploring other options because it feels like it has to. Trump's tariffs were designed to protect American workers. But if those policies fracture trade relationships and push partners toward rival powers, then the damage may run far deeper than economic losses. In this new trade world, isolation isn't strength, it's a liability. And for the U.S., the question isn't whether tariffs backfire, it's how long we're willing to pretend they